All right, so joining us on the podcast today is Felicia Zorn, VP of Customer Success at Lexicon Tech. So I appreciate you joining on today. And yeah, just to start out, are you able to give our audience a little bit of an idea of what you guys do over at Lexicon and obviously your role, as well as the teams that you manage day to day?
Thank you for having me. So, Lexicon has been around for over 25 years, and we work in K-12, which is relatively new arm of the business, but we repair Chromebooks, laptops, and certain Apple devices for K-12 institutions nationwide. And I joined the team in the early fall of 2024 to become a new executive to own the customer success arm of the business, which is focused on working with district administrators in the K-12 space to make sure that their IT assets are in good health. And my team is responsible for owning the data aspect, being in a more consultative role, and then also making sure that the claims process is going through as all of the policies are insurance underwritten.
Have you always worked in the education space or the customer success space, a little of both? Where did your journey start out there?
Yeah, so I've had a really fun journey of being a classroom teacher turned executive. So I was a former middle school. Yes, everyone can cringe for a second remembering that time of life. I was a middle school reading and language arts teacher that transitioned out of the classroom into an ed tech startup, if you will, that was more on the SaaS side of things, and just had a lot of really great opportunities working there and was able to just learn from wonderful mentors and executives and eventually work my way up to the executive table at that org and then join Lexicon. But as far as being on the CS side, I actually spent a lot of time on the sales side for a long time, was really teaching the sales team how to walk the walk and talk the talk of working in the K-12 space, which is really very different from what a lot of people are used to. Even if they're seasoned sales vets, you have to know how to really get your point across and be a salesperson, but you can never make it seem like it's just about closing the deal, because everyone in education, no matter which level they get to in their career, is there for the children. So the minute that you make it about a paycheck and not about kids is when you have to really kind of walk back your value prop. And so I spent a lot of time just teaching the sales team and then transitioning over into more of the CS side. But it was really great for me because I had that experience in sales to then how to grow and scale CS.
And I'm sure it's really easy because you feel like you can actually connect with that side a lot more than other people who aren't maybe traditionally on the education side. And I guess what motivated you? I know that the day to days of both of those kind of look a lot different. So, what kind of motivated you to leave the classroom and switch over to a company focused on tech?
It's a great question. I think if you talk to most teachers, you'll find that teaching is the most rewarding experience you can have. There's nothing quite like working with young minds and just working with kids. Like, it's really fun. But there's a lot of things outside of just the teaching part that can make education not a fun place to be sometimes. So I was at this kind of midsection point of I was teaching. I've been in the classroom for 5 years. In the state that I live in, if you go to 10 years, you're vested in the retirement system. And so I was like, I knew that if I did year 6, I would go to year 10. And so I was like, I'm going to take a break and just see if I can find something else to make sure that this is really what I want to do with my life and my career. And I had people telling me all along, why are you a teacher? Do you want to try something different? You have these, you're a natural leader, all these just different things I've been told for a long time. And so, yeah, one thing led to another and ended up in in an ed tech company. And that's been really where I found my soft and sweet spot. And I've been able to use what I've learned to help other teachers transition out of the classroom, even if I couldn't hire them, just giving them tools and tricks to learn to help with that. But it matters a lot to me that I stay in this industry because it in some way I am still giving back and helping kids.
That definitely makes sense. And do you think you'd ever want to go back, or do you think you're stuck here now that you've made the switch?
I get asked that a lot. I don't know if I'd ever go back into the classroom, but I have found ways to stay involved. And so I volunteer as a member of the citizen review panel in the county that I live in, which is a sworn in position through the juvenile justice system to where I help oversee cases for children who are displaced from their family. And I work with the children, the court appointed special advocates, the foster families, the teachers, and even the parents working their case plans to try to get reunification with their children. And so I found a way to still give back in other different ways. I'll volunteer at my kids' schools and help with homework and just different things in the community to where I'm still there, but in an offshoot capacity.
Yeah, so that's great. Like you still get the best of both worlds and get to dip your feet in without being all the way on the other side still. Yeah, that's awesome. And I just wanted to shift gears a little bit here, more towards the lexicon side now that we've learned a little bit more about your background. How have you seen the customer experience, or in particular, the customer success side, change and evolve just over the past year here?
So again, Lexicon's been around for a long time, but they've only been working with K-12 schools for about 5 years. There's a very different way that you talk to a school administrator than you do a purchasing decision maker for, say, Tractor Supply. It's just a different experience. And so a lot of it has been introducing customer success in place of customer service, understanding that it's not transactional. It's really about relationship building. And again, it's not just having communication, soft skills, but really being data driven and identifying whispers before they become screams, and you being able to solution and already have solutions in place or progress in place before a customer even identifies a problem. So I think that's been something that over the past year, Lexicon, with me being in this role and growing and scaling the team and leveling up the team, that they're really starting to understand just the nuances that go into what true customer success looks like.
And I think that's interesting that you mentioned, like, obviously it makes sense that you're talking to different customers in different ways, but how many customers would you say that you have, or percentage wise, on the education side versus everything else?
5 years ago, the business was in the enterprise space. And then when they first started working in education, it was about 95 enterprise, 5% K-12. And now it's flip flopped to where it's about 90% K-12 and 10% enterprise. So the customer base has changed dramatically. And so that's how they've really been reinvesting into the future of the org, is staying in the K-12 space and not always, not necessarily completely sunsetting on enterprise, but scaling back.
Yeah, and I guess that's interesting too. Like, what kind of pushed that shift over? Is it, I guess, what's the reason why things made that big shift? And it sounds like it was a really dramatic shift over the past 5 years. I guess just personally, I'm a little curious to hear what caused that shift.
So if we can all take ourselves back 5 years ago, you would know this is the onset of the global pandemic. All of a sudden, schools were shut down and every school system was scrambling to figure out, how do we make kids learn from home? And so it became the school districts that weren't necessarily ready for one-to-one technology had to be ready overnight. So they started purchasing Chromebooks and different devices to get to their students, because you couldn't just have kids continuing to use their personal iPad. You had to have some sort of controls for the asynchronous learning. And so school systems had to invest or extra invest and use ESSER funds to get devices to kids. And all the while knowing that those funds would eventually dry up, that this wasn't going to be something that would be, it's actually sad to know that for once education was fully funded and now we're back to education not being fully funded. So they made tremendous investments into this technology, but they also knew that they were handing a device over to a 6-year-old and over to a 16-year-old. And not to pick on my middle schoolers, but I think we all can imagine how much a 14-year-old boy is going to take care of a computer. How many times did you lose your jacket or your backpack or your lunchbox, your water bottle? They lose their Chromebook just as much. And so what they found was they needed to protect those assets. And so that's where Lexicon was able to say, yeah, we can fix that broken screen. We can replace the motherboard. We can do all these things so that your in-school technicians don't have to do this. They can focus on making sure that quality education is taking place, and that the teachers are getting the support they need, let us take that work off of you and we'll get the devices back to you even quicker.
And would you say the footprint now, since that change from when it shifted from enterprise over to the education side, would you say there's a good footprint now where even without the funding, it's stuck enough where you'll continue to drive business that way? Or do you think it will ever shift back over at all to the enterprise side?
I don't know if it'll ever switch fully to where I think there's just always going to be new ways to invest in technology and protecting devices. I will say that with school districts right now having to clamp down on their budgets, they're trying to squeeze as much life out of these devices as possible. So they're looking for, we can't refresh and buy new devices every year or every 3 or 4 years like we were doing. So how do we make these legacy fleets last longer? So they're looking for providers like Lexicon that will ensure used devices and extend their lifespan. Also, an enterprise business, if they've got iPads in people's hands, if it breaks or if water gets spilled on it or whatever, like it's not a big investment necessarily for them to just go buy another one. Whereas a school district, if you think about the number of kids that lose, break, misplace, lost and stolen devices, just the quantity is going to increase because again, your end user is a child, whereas an enterprise users are adults. So there's always going to be a risk factor involved in working with youth that is always going to need some level of partnership through someone, a provider like Lexicon, to make sure that they get as much money and life out of those devices as possible.
Definitely. And the next question I did want to move to is around challenges that leaders have been seeing. So, what's one major challenge that you think most customer experience leaders aren't prepared for yet? And I know this is maybe a little bit different from like the traditional SaaS space, since you guys are more like IT hardware based. Can you outline maybe what you think challenges on your side leaders are seeing today?
I think that no matter what industry you're in, there's the kind of unknown fear that everyone has right now of AI. Everyone seems to think that CS is going to be the biggest target for AI coming in and taking people's jobs. And what I keep telling everyone is like AI is not going to take your job, but someone who embraces AI is going to take your job. And again, I think this is where you also have that misalignment of customer service and customer success. AI is never going to have all the soft skills of a human. And they're also not going to be able to offer the critical thinking and problem solving and unique kind of approach that a human can make working directly with someone that they've built a relationship with. So I would say I recently heard them say AI is still in its infanthood. And I was like, no, I was like, AI is not a baby. A baby can't go get me coffee. A baby can't write an email for me. I was like, AI is like a college intern. You can use them for certain things and trust it to be right, but you're still going to double check. Like you're still going to look and you're really going to put your eyes on it and you're not going to give them the hardest project that you have. And so I think that if we start to recognize that AI can be our intern and it can do certain things, that's a better approach.
And how much right now would you say you enable your team to lean into AI? I know every company that I talk to is different, but where are you guys at like in your AI journey with just how your customer success team uses AI and how they're learning and adapting with it each day?
Definitely for polishing emails. I think that we all have lived long enough in the email and chat space to know that tone matters. And just because I read an email a certain way, you might read it a completely different way. So I definitely want them to think about the level of escalation. How do we make sure that we're being conversational and casual, but also our point is getting across without there being any shade of nuance involved. So definitely just email crafting, but also using it for meetings to where it can capture the meeting, synthesize, make sure that even if you're documenting action items along the way, that you didn't miss something. So just checking every box, making sure that it's there. And then also, as you're looking at a customer, or looking at doing a QBR, using it to just make sure that everything is there anything that it could capture that we weren't thinking of, or what could the future look like? So really just, again, like an assistant alongside you.
And I like how you phrase that where it's not necessarily like in infancy stages, it's more like an assistant or like an intern. I think that's how a lot of people are using it right now. And it was just an interesting way to put it, but I definitely agree there. I guess that kind of leads me into my next question here on the customer connection and empathy side, how you relate with customers and how you still feel deeply connected with customer pain, even as AI and automation increase. So I guess on your end, how do you ensure that your team is still feeling that deep connection with the customers, even as they're using AI and maybe polishing emails with it each day and having things checked over with AI?
Yeah, so all of our customers are set up on a recurring meeting schedule for whatever works for them. For some of them, it's weekly, some monthly, some quarterly, but it guarantees a face to face, even if it's a virtual point with their CSM, so that they're making sure that they're making that eye contact, that we're showing up, that we're there. That matters. And so just making sure that there's always some level of ongoing communication. And I think that the more that you can tune in to what is relevant to your customer's market. And again, working in education, there's so many things that are nuancing and changing between state to state. And so knowing that if you're working, think about Florida, you had a very different population if your territory is South Florida versus North Florida or Central Florida or the Panhandle. The things going on in Miami are not always the same things going on in Orlando or in Jackson. So knowing what is going on in whether it's the government, even down to the local school board level, at the legislative level, knowing that and then being able to bring it up in those conversations where you're not just an expert at lexicon, but you're an expert in education and K-12 education.
And would you say it's difficult, just going off of that point, would you say it's difficult if you don't come from a background in education like yourself to keep up to date with that? Or is there ways that you enable your team to stay up to date with what's happening in schools? You said local government and things like that.
There's a learning curve. For me, it's more innate because it's how I was classically trained and then had the boots on the ground experience. But I've watched people come into organizations that I've been a part of that worked at NCR or worked in a law office or sold, insurance, car insurance. And it's just about how willing are they to learn and to absorb and then just keep up the homework of it. Like you really have to education is changing every day and it's not as steady as other industries. And so I think that anyone can come in and do this. It's just you've got to be willing to know that it's evergreen. The pendulum is always swinging. You have to educate yourself.
I'm sure it comes naturally as well. If somebody's super passionate about the education space, I'm sure even if they don't have a background, it would still come naturally to keep them motivated to stay up to date. So yeah, I think that's great. Wanted to move on to this next question here about customer feedback and your guys' product roadmap with how you're rolling things out. How do you ensure that you guys are capturing customer feedback and having it influence your roadmap meaningfully after you talk with your customers?
We have a couple different ways, of course. We capture it in a Google form so that we just have the ability to track it on a spreadsheet of what are we hearing, what kind of requests are being made so that then when we do have time to collaborate with IT and dev and R&D to be able to show like, hey, this isn't just anecdotal, like here's the record to show it, but also hosting internal QBRs, taking your customer base, dissecting it and really digging in deep, being like, this is what's going, this is not what's going well. And is this something that we can fix through internal collaboration? And where it's not just CS that is owning it. Like, how else do we show ownership across the org for making the customer experience better?
And would you say like your customer success team has good opportunities internally to work cross-functionally with those dev and R&D teams, or is that kind of a siloed thing? I know that at some organizations, they don't always get the chance to be able to internally with those teams. So I'm just curious, like what your guys' process there is for keeping everybody connected.
We've actually incorporated someone from that team who I call an honorary member of the CS team. He's on our internal CS chat channel and everything so that he can not only see our shenanigans, but also see when we're talking about something related to a customer strategy. Because having him there to just listen in and hear about what's going on a day to day basis arms him to be in his meetings to be like, oh, I think that we need to prioritize this request because I've heard it 3 times in the last month, or I've heard it 12 times in the last month. So it's not to where I have to have the entire team there, but just having someone who has that liaison approach to be able to nudge them when they need to be.
So being able to oversee and identify trends as they come up.
And just having that extra person, an advocate built into the team.
I guess getting to the end of our questions here, I just had one more that I really wanted to ask you about org-wide learning. I think org-wide learning, especially as knowledge bases increase, as AI kind of evolves, is super important. So how do you turn individual either support or customer conversations into org-wide learning?
Great question. So we use as our kind of software for creating playbooks, but we also have just an incredible marketing team. And so what they'll do is throughout our headquarters and satellite facilities, we have slides that are constantly going through where people just see information. And sometimes it's happy birthday to this person, but it could also be like, here's a new tip or trick. Here's something that changed. And that way, even if it may not impact someone's job or role in that moment, they're at least getting that subconsciously to where they're like getting to learn something new or, oh, this changed, or, oh, we took this event, pivoted in this way. And I think that's been a really fun way to like take that cross functional piece to where it doesn't have to be a meeting, it doesn't have to be an email, TLDR. Like it really is just right there in your face and it will just naturally be absorbed.
And do you guys have an internal, you said Slack channel that you guys just are constantly in communication every day?
No, not really. For my team, yes, and for other teams, yes. But we also, if you can imagine, we have it's very much a warehouse. Like we have people that are receiving trucks at the dock and bringing in thousands of computers at a time. So a lot of people aren't sitting at a computer, they're soldering their pieces. They're very much boots on the ground. So we have to take a more diversified approach to getting information out to people.
I think that's great. I've really appreciated you coming on today. I think we've had a lot of great insights and things that we talked about. Just to end here, I guess the question that I always like to ask, is there anything that you'd like to leave the audience with? Just like a piece of advice, information, something that have been thinking about that's on your mind lately? That's usually where we end off here.
I think the most important thing I could say to anyone is take time today to thank a teacher. Teachers make every job, every profession, every armed service member, every police officer, firefighter, nurse, doctor, every single person you come in contact with. It's funny, it's why it's your security thing. Who's your favorite teacher? Because every single person has that one teacher that sticks with them no matter what. And so even if you've been out of that classroom for 30 years, even if they're not a teacher anymore, I guarantee you know someone in your life who's a teacher. Tell them thank you for doing what they do.
Yeah, and I don't just have one, I have about 5 of them, so I might need to call them up. Awesome. I appreciate you coming on today. I think it was great having you, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Likewise, thank you so much.
Yep, thanks, Felicia. See ya.